No, no. Okay, I'm going to call the January 20th, 2022 meeting of the Escondido Historic Preservation Commission to order. Welcome, everybody. If you'd stand and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could we have the roll?
Chair Span?
Here.
Commissioner Correll?
Here.
Commissioner Hanlon?
Here.
Commissioner Purvis?
Here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, do I have a motion to make any corrections to the minutes of our last meeting and then approve?
I'll move to correct the double entry of commissioners present, omitting the second one. Commissioner Correll was absent.
Okay, and I'll second that. So,
All right, I'll go through, and since we won't be using the voting system, all commissioners in favor, just please raise your hand. Commissioner Purvis, how do you vote? Wonderful. Motion approved 4-0. And then we did receive one written communication. I'll read that into the record. 3 minutes starting now. It says following. Chair Span and Commissioners, Save Our Heritage organization has reviewed the staff recommendation and historic structure assessment report for the Arts and Crafts era bungalow at 1405 South Escondido Boulevard. Soho finds this resource to be highly intact and significant under criterion 3 of the California Register of the Historic Resources, as well as criteria 2, 3, and potentially 7 of the City of Escondido Historic Register. The Historic Preservation Commission should not concur with the staff recommendation, but instead designate this resource for significance under various local criteria. Originally constructed in 1913 in an unknown style and remodeled circa 1925 into an arts and crafts era resource, the consultant report identifies this change as significant to the evolution of the building and not an adverse impact. Character defining features still present include the low-pitched front gable roof, deep eaves, horizontal wood clapboards, recessed full-width entry porch, and modest square support posts, attic venting, wood sash windows, and one diamond-paneled transom window on the front facade. As noted in the consultant's report, Soho concurs in the rear deck and the small shed are reversible and do not impact the building. While this is a modest bungalow that was updated in the arts and crafts era style, the working class nature and evolution of this resource are part of the significance and should be evaluated within the report. It is imperative that the preservation of Escondido's historic build environment reflect the diversity of the community present during that time. Identified as historically significant in the updated 1990 Escondido Historic Survey, Soho finds this bungalow retains integrity of location, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. The consultant report also finds integrity of location, design, and materials are present. However, the report ignores the workmanship illustrated by the diamond pane transom and wood sash windows, trim, porch detailing, and various other features of this modest bungalow. Since this house was constructed prior to the auto court, now demolished, and supporting buildings, it still retains integrity of feeling and association, which the consultant dismisses based upon removal of other later resources. This bungalow was constructed in 1913 at the present larger historical context. It does not remove integrity of feeling and association, since these resources were not present in 1913 and don't contribute to the use of the bungalow. Last, Appendix B of the consultant's report, page 72, the historical assessment by planner Paul Bingham states that line, while not being of great architectural or historical significance, alone appears to be a boilerplate entry, which indeed is included in a majority of the entries in the EHSS, even for many resources which are on the city's local register. Since the groundless and boilerplate language is used throughout the consultant and staff report as reasoning this resource is not significant. Both reports should be revised to provide valid reasoning. This letter continues on to explain the important fact he misses for this property is on page 1 of the EHSS, namely the ranking of the historic resource by a historian as significant under criterion 3, and I apologize, their time has expired. I can continue reading, but it's up.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Oral communication. Does anybody in the audience wish to speak to us about something, anything? Okay, seeing none and not having any public hearings, we're going to go right to our current business. Item H1, PL 21-0304, a request to demolish the existing structure and construct a new affordable housing project.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Nicholas, Project Planner. This is PL 210304, associated with a potential apartment complex located at 1401 South Escondido Boulevard. Some quick background. The original construction of the site occurred in 1913. In 1925, there was a remodel, and the site has changed ownership and use multiple times over the years. It is on the city survey. It is not a designated historic resource, and it has been identified on the survey as a contributor to a district only, not as an individual contributor. The request the request today before the HPC is to determine that this is not in fact a historic resource, and this item was tabled from the November 18th meeting to this meeting. Here you can see the green arrow is pointing to the structure in question. There is a criteria that is set forth within the city's zoning code on how to evaluate potential historic resources. There are 7 such criteria that apply to structures themselves. There are, I believe, 13, but the rest of them have to do with signage. One such requirement is that it be 50 years old or more. And then it does require one additional finding. The applicant has provided a historic assessment by a qualified historic resource consultant, and found that none of the other findings can be met for the proposed site. And staff has reviewed that document and agrees that there are no second criteria to designate this a historic resource. This is the current rendering of the proposed affordable housing project that would be constructed on the site. It is still going through a public review process. This is not a finalized, but this is just meant to give a perspective of what the potential design could look like. So with that, staff does recommend that the HPC concur that the residence is not a historic resource. And that concludes my presentation. I had thought that the applicant owner is here, but the applicant and the consultant should hopefully be here shortly. But staff is able to address any questions the commissioners may have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of staff?
I have a question, Commissioner Purvis, but it's actually related to the online meeting. If you could please turn on the control room so I could see the stuff that you're presenting. This is to staff.
It has always been on. What you'll have to do is change your visual grid on your Jitsi by pressing W.
It's not, my grid is, now that's me. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
It wasn't on, so, all right.
If there's a presentation, when you change your visual grid and by pressing W, it will give you all the picture thumbnails, and when presented, you will see it. So for example, right there.
It was not providing that. It is now.
Yep.
It wasn't during his presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any questions, Commissioner Purvis? I guess not.
I do not have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, staff. Now, I know it's not a public hearing, but does anybody in the audience want to address this item? Please come forward. And would you state your name for the record, please?
Good afternoon. I'm Glenn Schneep. I am the trustee for the Schneep Family Trust that owns the property. Here we are again today trying to determine the validity of the historic designation on this old house. After 2 reports were done, prepared by reputable research firms, and having concluded that there is nothing historically or architecturally significant about this structure, we're still hanging here on, this council in the past has refused to acknowledge these opinions. The most recent study was done by one of San Diego's most reputable and recommended firms that has provided expert opinion on developments all over this county. If this was a court case, these researchers could be considered expert witnesses in the field. But again, their findings are being questioned. It's like playing baseball and, you know, I don't like what the umpire says, but I got to put up with it. So I've got 2 umpires here that are saying that this thing is not historic, and I would please like you to consider that educated and professional opinion that this does not qualify as a historic house. Thank you.
Thank you. And would you please fill out one of those yellow speaker slips before you leave and give it to the city clerk?
Oh, sure.
Just thank you. Does anybody else want to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'll open it for commissioner comment.
I'm good.
Thank you.
If somebody wants, did you have any comment? Commissioner Purvis, did you? Okay, does anybody want to make a motion?
Oh, and since we are joining virtually,
I would like
we'll
Oh.
do motions audibly. Yeah.
Okay, did you want to? Did you want to say something, Commissioner Nicole Purvis?
Yeah, yes. It seems like the applicant is putting the cart before the horse. And what we're here to do today is make a determination onto whether this particular property is historic. And that's really all we're looking at. I reviewed the report again, and the questions that I had commented on in November of 2020, when we were reviewing the 2 historic reports from the 2 different consultants. The second consultant didn't address the questions that had been raised, and they didn't evaluate this particular resource within the context of Escondido's architectural heritage. Our architectural heritage is different than the larger cities around us, particularly San Diego, and our styles they're just different, as we know. So I am surprised that the cart is being put before the horse in regards to going forward with a full-blown development project and presenting renderings to us and talking to us about that, rather than coming to us to find out how we would vote on whether or not we think this property is historic, because that's really the first hurdle that this applicant would need to get past. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if nobody else has. Okay, I don't feel that the property has the historic integrity to encumber the owner to have to not do something with the property. So I'm going to motion that we accept staff's recommendation to approve PL 210304.
Second.
Okay, now we're going to take a hand vote. All in favor? Okay. Opposed? Opposed? Okay. 3-1, the motion carries. We're going to move on to current business H2, Sasani Residence delist. It's a request from the applicant to delist the project site from the city's local register pursuant to the Escondido zoning ordinance, Article 40, Section 33-795.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sorry about that. My name is Veronica Morona, Senior Planner, and I will be presenting item H2 to you today. This is a request to delist 340 Waverly Place from the city's local register list. The project site is an approximately 8,200 square foot lot located at 340 Waverly Place within the Creekside neighborhood of the downtown specific plan. The site is located generally north of Sherman Place, south of Clark Street, west of Juniper, and east of North Broadway. The project site is surrounded by existing single and multifamily residential development to the east, west, north, and south, all within the Creekside neighborhood in the downtown specific plan. The site is currently developed with an approximately 700 square foot residence located to the rear of the site in the southeastern corner, highlighted on this slide in red. The site fronts Waverly Avenue and maintains alley access at the rear. The existing structure is shown here on this slide. Key map is provided in the top left for each point of view of the photographs provided, and photographs are provided under attachment 2 of your staff memo. The existing residence is a one-story cottage-style single-family residence. Consists mostly of a square floor plan with wood frame exterior. The structure has an irregular facade due to an addition constructed in 1951 and differing roof lines and exterior walls as noted in or as shown in photographs 2 and 4 of the slide. The exterior is painted tan with dark brown accent on the windows and doors. To provide some background, 340 Waverly Place was initially nominated and confirmed as a contributor to the local register in May 1992 on the grounds of criteria 2 and 5. Criteria 2 is an Escondido building or buildings that embody distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type, specimen, or a representative of a recognized architect's work and are not substantially altered. Criteria 5 is a resource that is 50 years old or has achieved historical significance within the past 50 years. This information is highlighted under attachment 3 of your memo. In February 2018, an application to relocate the listed structure to the front of the lot and construct 3 residential units was submitted and unanimously supported by the HPC. That application was withdrawn and the property was sold. In December 2018, unpermitted modifications to the fenestration and an expansion to the exterior water heater structure at the rear of the residence occurred and a code compliance case was opened. City staff worked with the property owner at the time to rectify this situation. The proposed project currently entails a request to delist the 340 Waverly Place property from the local register pursuant to Article 40, Section 33795 of the Escondido zoning ordinance. This slide outlines the 2 criteria utilized when determining whether to delist a resource from the local register. The applicant has prepared a historical resource eligibility evaluation provided under attachment 4 of your staff memo, which substantiates criteria 1 and 2, and further explains how 340 Waverly Place would not qualify for listing under the city's current requirements outlined in Article 40, Section 33794. So attachment 1 of the staff memo just provides more detailed information on the substantiation to these 2 criteria for delisting. As described in the resource report provided, as described in attachment 5, which is the application supplemental materials, the applicant is requesting solely to delist the property under this request. There is an intent at a future point to develop the site with residential development, but there are no plans, there is no funding for that, it's simply an intent. So the project-specific historical resource eligibility evaluation provides the new documentation that supports that the property did not possess distinctive architectural characteristics at the time it was designated and does not possess them presently. It states that the original construction date of the residence listed on the historic resource form is actually incorrect and that it was constructed in 1925, not 1915. Additionally, the structure was constructed in 2 episodes, one in 1925 as stated previously, and then one in 1951. Based on this new evidence and documentation detailing that addition, the property was actually not 50 years old at the time of the designation in 1992, thus making the criteria number 5, which is the 50-year requirement, not correct when it was designated. Further, that resource report details that evidence has been presented showing that modifications to the property have further removed architectural features since listing. So as mentioned, the 340 Waverly Place did not have distinctive architectural features, which is a requirement of criteria 2 that was used to support the nomination to the listing. And so those are not present and were not present at the time of listing, but any architectural features that were present at the 1992 listing have since been diminished with the unpermitted changes and subsequent fenestration changes that are documented in that resource report. There's a lot of the use of criteria, so I apologize, it's a bit confusing, but there are multiple criteria in our code. So with that, staff recommends that the Historic Preservation Commission approve the request to delist 340 Waverly Place from the local register, as supported by the project-specific resource eligibility evaluation and substantiation provided in attachment 1 for criteria 1 and 2 to delist. With that, that concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is present, as is the historic resource firm that provided that report.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much. And does anybody have any questions of staff? I have one, but I can wait till everybody's done. Going back to the 2018 unanimous decision by this commission, which was before your time, I know, that decision was to grant the delisting, is that correct?
No, it was to move the property. Correct.
That is correct, Commissioner Corral. So the request was to just relocate the listed structure to the front of the lot so that the rear of the property could be used to construct new residential units.
I see. Okay, thank you. If nobody else has any questions of staff, it's not a public hearing, but if anybody wants to speak to this matter, yeah.
Commissioner Hanlon, I have a question, but that building was not moved, correct?
No.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And if you'd state your name for the record.
Thank you very much, Chairman Span, Commissioners. My name is Douglas Cupel. I'm with Urbana Preservation and Planning, along with my colleague Alexia Landa, who wrote the report. And we're here to answer any questions as necessary.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of the applicant?
Commissioner Purvis,
Go ahead.
I have a question regarding the, I'm sorry, let me think how to ask this. I recall in the report that staff had directed the applicant, not this particular one, but back in 2018, to do some, I guess, bring back the windows back to a wood sash and things like that. And I wanted to know if there was what exactly was done. Because in the report, I understand that it was not 1915 for the back house, 1925. The front portion is 1951. And I understand that the consultant is saying that it is not eligible then because of the age requirement for at least the front portion, and that it's not eligible presently to be listed because it has gone through multiple fenestration changes. And I would like for you to walk us through that because I didn't see it in the report clearly.
Thank you, Commissioner Purvis. So the code compliance case from 2018 included changes to the fenestration, both existing windows and doors, but also included new window openings that were subsequently made to be closed back up. So for example, I believe on the north facade, there had been cut a small bathroom window, very long and narrow. That's no longer present because as part of the code compliance case, they had to change that back to just essentially no window. At a prior time, there were aluminum sash windows, I believe, and staff is not aware at this point in time, based on the records in our record system, whether those windows that were changed out during the 2018 without permits were from the aluminum to aluminum, aluminum to wood. All staff knows at this point in time is that the final fenestration provided were the wood as required by the certificate of appropriateness staff process to bring that into compliance.
Okay. And then back in February of 2018, when this property went, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I'm on, went forward to the HPC, it was a 7-0 that it was a historic resource and that it could not be demolished, but it should rather be relocated to the front of the property to allow that particular applicant to develop. So I'm just putting that out there. It's a big flip here. And I understand that in 1980, when it was originally identified, or in the early 80s, and then in 1990, and then listed in 1992, I understand that at that time, the upper portion that was built in 1951 it didn't meet the age criteria. But again, just similar to the last project, this is our architectural history. This is Escondido's architectural history. And they're not fancy. They're vernacular buildings. They retain the historic integrity, and with their siding, it doesn't, I mean, this is the evolution of architecture in Escondido and portions of the town. I mean, and we see it and we're not addressing it. And I don't really have any additional questions, but just want to make that statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it up for commissioner discussion.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I guess this is just comments to the other commissioners. Like, I want to protect every possible property within this district that I can, but I also want, in my personal opinion, to apply that logic to properties, not just blanket across the board to every single property in town, right? So this specific property, in my opinion, I don't think, in my viewpoint, is one that I would want to necessarily try to protect, because it's been changed so much, and I don't think it's the highest and best use for that area, considering where the property is. So my personal opinion is I would support their motion.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanlon, I agree with you. I think that highest and best use sometimes does have something to say. And from what I see, there's really not much left that was original and true to this property. I concur.
I mean, I would have, and I believe I was here in 2018 when we supported it, completely support doing what they were going to do, but that didn't happen, you know. And at this point, that I don't think it really qualifies for us trying to protect this piece of property at really a detriment, in my opinion.
And also, I just want to remind the commissioners, all we're doing is taking it off the list. One quick question, staff. At some point when they come back with a request to develop this, will they have to come back as far as a request to demolish it?
If the structure is removed from the list, then, Sean, would you correct me if I'm wrong, the demolition section of Article 40 is only for listed structures, or is it for all structures on the survey?
No, if it's off of the list, then it would not necessitate coming back before HPC.
Well, I was just wondering, having looked at it, it seems like a small enough building to move, and with the accessory dwelling unit tsunami, that it possibly would be a candidate to move. I don't know what the condition is as far as the actual structure is, but I would just ask the applicant, when they do come back, to possibly put it up to give it away or sell it for $1 if somebody wants to move it. But I have to agree with my fellow commissioners on the dais. I don't really see the value of this as a historic. It's just a little place in a neighborhood that doesn't warrant pouring a lot of money into it to keep it going. I will support the motion.
Commissioner Purvis, I would like to remind my fellow peers here that we are actually not a planning commission. and we shouldn't be examining the best use for a lot. Our role is to determine whether or not a property is historic. And if it is historic, then we need to say so. If it is not historic, then we would need to say so. In this particular case, the property was identified as historic. It was listed as historic. And in 2018, the board unanimously, which includes two people that are currently present, who voted unanimously to retain it. They recognized the historic value of it at that time. Changes were made to address the code compliance issues that brought it back into significant or appearance. So the question, it's really I guess this is really a two-part question. I think that we all agree that the front 1951 portion obviously did not meet the age criteria. It needs to be 50 years of age. I think that no one's going to dispute that. We all know how to do math, basic math. It wasn't old enough at the time when it was identified in the 1980 survey and the 1990 survey, and then listed in 92. But the question is now, which I obviously can see where you guys are going with this, whether or not that, I guess it's a question for staff. So if the back portion is and always did meet the age criteria, and then that front portion meets it now and would have met it in the updated survey in 2000 because it would have met the age threshold, what are we looking at? If we're delisting it, we're being asked to delist it, and the argument is that half of it didn't meet the age threshold. And the second argument is that it doesn't have any architectural character defining features, but we know that's not true because that's the particular type of building it is. It's a vernacular cottage. The integrity is still present. The character defining features of it, even though they're plain and simple, are still present for both buildings. So that's the question.
Attachment 4, the historical resource eligibility evaluation, provides one substantiation to the request to delist, which is the criteria 1 and criteria 2 of section 33795. The evaluation also then evaluates the structure in its current form against the criteria, the 13 criteria to list a structure, list a property to the historic register, and contends that it does not currently meet the standards required, which is, as Sean's previous presentation mentioned, you have to meet minimum of two of those criteria. So even if the structure was not eligible for meeting listing in 1992 because of the 50-year limit, as Commissioner Purvis points out, it is now over 50 years old. Currently, the historic resource evaluation substantiates that it wouldn't meet standards today to be listed either.
And the reason that the reason why the consultant is saying it's not eligible under criterion 2, which would be for the architecture actually, is because it's had changes to the fenestration. And fenestration, if you're not familiar, is really the door and window openings. And in 92, the photo from the survey form, I think it looks like aluminum windows. And then it sounds like code compliance came in and then they said, hey, you need to put it back to the wood sash, which it was done. And then at some point it came to our commission in 2018 and it was, everybody on the commission, 7-0, said it was historic. And they said, no, you can't demolish it, move it up to the front, relocate it to the front. And that's where I'm trying to understand, particularly from the two, and you're totally not a big deal to change your mind, but it's like, it's important to why are you changing your mind? What's different today than a few years ago? And that can be a rhetorical question, but
I don't think I'm necessarily changing my mind. I think if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the request in 2018 was not whether or not it was historic, it was whether or not it was allowable to be moved, correct? So it wasn't a negotiation or a conversation on it's historic, it was about would we approve them to do this, which we did.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any other discussion or a motion?
So I'm sorry, Commissioner Purvis, what is the reason that the consultant, this is to the consultant, what is the reason you're saying that the property does not meet criterion 2? And I know you're saying it's because the fenestration's been changed, but if you could tell us what you're seeing and how it's changed and how that has eliminated its integrity for a vernacular building. Please.
Chairman Span, Commissioner Purvis, thank you for that question. And really, before I get to the direct answer to that, I think it's prudent to review where we're at. And essentially, Commissioner Carell has hit the nail on the head, is that we were asked to evaluate the building in its current state. So I don't believe that was done prior to this time. And there are some requirements to delist a property. And so our direction was to look at those requirements and to see if it was a candidate for delisting today. Now, granted, delisting is not a common thing, but it certainly happens, and we have to realize that it's not a static process. Historic preservation is not static. There's frequent changes to National Register boundaries, National Register contributors and non-contributors. So I wouldn't say it's common, but it happens, and it's happened in this case. So one of the criteria is that new documentation has come forward. And that new documentation was that first, the property was not eligible at the time it was listed for two reasons. And the first is it wasn't old enough. So there's a very small chunk of it which probably was old enough, but there's a larger addition which really overwhelms the original. So at that point, it failed on the 50-year test, but it also failed on the architectural significance. And you have to realize that this property is a secondary property on that lot, that the front house was lost. If you go down that street and you look at the streetscape, you have some beautiful homes sited on the front of these properties. This one was most likely a shack, a tiny garage, something like that, and then the original house burned or was lost, and at that time in the 1950s they added a very large addition to the original shack, a garage, carport, and made it a residence. So that's the true history of the property. Now, that's based on some inference from an archaeological perspective. So Ms. Land is an archaeologist. I'm a registered professional archaeologist, in addition to having a PhD in history. So that's the first criteria. It wasn't eligible when it was listed for two reasons, age and architectural significance. So the second criteria is that things have happened since, and bad things, and so it's lost integrity for the changes to the fenestration, which we're talking about the windows. They're not original. They've been replaced more than once. There have been other changes to the current appearance. So if it did have significance, which we argue it didn't, that significance has been lost due to the alterations of the property. So that's the situation we're in. It's an unfortunate situation, of course, but the current applicant really had no knowledge really of what happened before he was dealing with the property as he purchased it. And so in our opinion, not eligible, and that meets the criteria at the time it was listed, meets the criteria for a delisting. So I hope that answers your questions, Ms. Commissioner Purvis.
Thank you. Please.
I motion to accept staff's recommendation to delist the property.
I will second that. So with a show of hands, all in favor of accepting the staff's recommendation? Okay. Was that a yes vote, Commissioner?
That is a yes vote.
Thank you. Okay, 4 yes votes, it's unanimous. That is PL 21-0494 to delist the property. Thank you. That's the end of our current business. Does anybody have anything to, oral communication from the audience? Seeing none, any commissioner comments? None, then we are adjourned.